Building rural wealth. Your business is busy as your cash. Talk to me about this, Ashleigh. What are we talking about here?
Yeah. So a lot of rural business owners understand this. Cash feels safe. It's familiar. It's visible. It's also reassuring. And then when you run a business, whether it's a farming operation, a clinic, construction company, cash in the bank can provide that sense of security, but also capacity as well. That means like payroll gets covered, the next repair doesn't cause immediate panic, and then also it gives you that cushion for when if you have a slow season. So for a lot of business owners, cash is like a financial version of breathing room, can take a deep breath. So cash, what we're saying today, is not a bad thing, but managing it correctly, that's where that key is. And that's kind of where a trap can kind of sneak in. So what starts off as like a smart cushion starts to grow into a huge money pile that's not doing anything for you and not working hard enough for you. So, and we hear things of like, well, I worked too hard for this money to risk it, or I should probably do something with it, but I'm not sure what makes sense. So it's easier not to do anything with it. And then I'll deal with that when it slows down. We always say that, and we know life really doesn't slow down much. We're not really here to criticize cash because it has a place, has an important place, but it has a role, and making sure it's used to that role is really important.
So let's start into this thing, Dan. So when a safety net becomes a ceiling, what are we talking about here?
Well, again, right along with what Ashleigh said, cash is king. That's always been the old saying, cash is king. And liquidity is important in every business. And it protects against those surprises. We talk about with people with businesses and just, personal finances, you need to have a safety net. You need to have something to go to. But for rural business especially, where income can fluctuate seasonally, having that buffer matters. But when cash piles up without a plan, that's when it can be a problem. Because we know that over the long term, it has not been cash sitting idle that has done the very best over the long term. Because what happens? Well, one thing, inflation can erode purchasing power. Second, opportunities get delayed, not because they're bad ideas, because the decision keeps getting postponed. And third, decision paralysis can keep in. When cash just accumulates without a clear purpose, it becomes harder to decide what that next move can be. I'll give you an example here. Let's say there's a small construction company that stacks cash reserves just in case, but never invests in systems or additional help that could reduce the owner's workload. How much of this cash has a clear job and how much is it just sitting? You hear the term opportunity cost. That's one that we look at all the time. Is there an opportunity that I'm missing out on because I'm hoarding cash?
From cash pile to cash plan. Okay, so there's always a plan, Ashleigh, that we can get to. So tell me about it.
So it kind of starts with a sit down and kind of just frank analysis, not really judgment of saying, okay, how much cash does this business actually need to run? And a lot of business owners feel guilty when they ask about the cash reserves because either they feel like, oh, I have too much, I don't have enough, or it's just all commingled together. I don't know exactly what I need for which part. So we see often if you can kind of give that cash a goal or a purpose and kind of even break it out into like maybe different accounts or different segments in your mind, that helps a lot. So we'll say, hey, maybe give it some categories. One is operation cash. What do you need to make the business run day to day? Hey, think payroll, inventory, repair. There's this is the need to cash. The other one is emergency reserves. So having that buffer. So when something goes awry, you can have it covered and you're not worried about, shit, am I going to make payroll the next day? Hey, the other one we often see is, hey, keeping a separate account for taxes. So, hey, your emergency reserves and what you keep aside for taxes, those really don't need to be sent in a checking account. They should be cash, but maybe we should look at a high yield savings account. Maybe we should look at some CD options to have it work a little bit harder, but still relatively liquid for you. And then the next one is kind of that goals-based cash. So saying, hey, I have some retirement planning, future business, or maybe an expansion project. So your time horizon on this one is longer. So then that's really where that opportunity cost, if you leave it in cash, like Dan was talking about, it can really erode that opportunity as well as maybe your future balances as well. So when everything sits all in one account commingled together, it kind of causes stress. And when we get stressed, we're like, oh, we'll deal with it later. I'm a perfect example of that, a procrastinator. We'll deal with it later. We know we need to deal with it, but breaking it out, asking, hey, what questions, and maybe segmenting it can kind of ease that stress a little and then gives you that opportunity or that launch pad to do something with it.
So what are some of the cash myths that are out there, Dan, that hold business owners back?
Well, you know, a lot of business owners, Aaron, they kind of stay stuck in that, you know, because the myths that you think about sound very reasonable. You know, some common ones are cash is the safest option, you know, but safety depends on the context, you know, because too little cash creates risk. Again, it's important to have some liquidity, but too much idle cash can quietly erode the value over time, just like Ashleigh was saying. Mm-hmm. You know, another myth that you hear, investing is just gambling. Well, that belief usually comes from seeing market swings on the news, but investing doesn't have to mean aggressive speculation. You know, in many cases, it simply means aligning your money with long-term goals and objectives. You know, what is the purpose of the money you have? And then the third myth is growth strategies are only for large companies or wealthy families. You know, in reality, some of the most thoughtful financial strategies we see come from small business owners, because they understand discipline. You know, we've seen business owners gradually move small portions of idle cash toward long-term goals, not necessarily all at once, not super aggressively. And the biggest change wasn't just financial, it's psychological. You know, once people understand their options, the uncertainties tend to fade. And, you know, I'm a believer, Aaron, that, you know, you need to invest in yourself and invest in your business, you know, and if you, to tie it to a biblical principle, you know, there are things in the Bible that talk about, you know, hoarding your riches. That, you know, we need to spread our riches and share with others. Well, part of, you know, hoarding cash is a little bit like hoarding, you know, you're hoarding your own riches and not reinvesting it back into your community and back into your business.
What kind of can help us cut through, Ashleigh? Let's cut through all the clutter and all the noise to help us cut through that indecision.
So finding the answer is asking the right questions. That's getting down to the basics of it. So here's maybe some questions to consider is, what do I realistically need for cash for the next 6 to 12 months of operations? That down and dirty number. What major expenses might be coming up in the next few years? Can I target that, timeline things out? Which long-term goals could this money support? And it's okay to both dream big with this one as well as think day-to-day operation ones. Because in your business owner, you're doing the same thing. You have your expectation 5-10 year plan, but then you also have your Monday through Friday plan as well. And then how will I react when markets fluctuate? So if you are invested in the market, things go up and down. You're never guaranteed. That's our big slogan. But flip side is, hey, do I have that time horizon to take that risk so I can potentially earn more than just sitting in cash and maybe beat inflation as well as just grow as well? Imagine cash just not sitting quietly, but supporting what matters to you and having a true purpose of why you have what you have.
It's good information. So, Dan, many times you have said in our conversations that small hinges swing big doors.
Absolutely.
But small steps equal big momentum as well, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me about this.
Well, you know, the good news about this is it doesn't have to be, you know, complicated. You don't have to put all this together and do it all at once. But I do believe in having a cash plan, you know, which seems kind of silly in some regard when you say that. But, you know, a practical progression might look something like first setting aside operating cash and the emergency reserves. You know, Ashleigh just referred to that. Second, identify a portion of excess cash that could support longer-term goals. And third, gradually explore options that match your timeline and comfort level, and maybe things that you are considering exploring in your business. You know, in other words, designate your cash for the task that it is designed for. We have those same type of conversations with business owners. You know, what is the purpose of these funds that you're holding is it designed to purchase machinery that's aging out, maybe, for example, or is it to fund future something, or is it, like we've been talking about today, is it just sitting there because you're scared? Now again, it's important to have liquidity, it's important to have backup funds, but your funds need to have a purpose. Is it just sitting there safely but not meaningfully?